Guys, special live edition Garden Report. We're not going to hang out forever, but we did want to jump on and talk a little bit about breaking news we had tonight, which is the Marcus Smart contract extension. Marcus Smart, this is something that was reported, it was about a week and a half ago, before Summer League for sure, a couple weeks ago, Bobby.
Yeah, right before Summer League, we were kicking this around, that 77 million number, and that's ultimately what it settled on here. They're going to be holding on to them to 2026.
77 was the number thrown out. It was amended to 68. 77 is the max they could pay him, and it escalates as time goes on. So it goes 17, 19, 19, like 20, 22 or something like that. Yeah. So this is what it is. Now, it's interesting because, we talked about it a bit when it was first reported. What does it mean? It was curious when the report first came out, because at the same time you had reports that Marcus Smart was possibly going to be traded because he's a bit of a headache and they wanted to move on. There were signs last year that things weren't working. He's a very polarizing player. You've obviously got people on both sides of it. So there's going to be, already I was in the chats just while you were getting ready and jumping on here, and a bunch of people love it, and a bunch of people are like, why did we do this? So reaction is going to be all over the map here. What's interesting to me is, again, what it means for the plans going forward. For a while, when the offseason began, it seemed like the Celtics were saving up all of their space and didn't want to do anything. And then news of the Smart thing comes out, and it's like, oh, I guess that's not the case. Now everyone's wondering, what does this mean? So, we've been kicking this around and nobody really knows. What it does mean for a fact is, look, Beal was really hard. Even with all of their cost-saving moves, you would have had to find a way to renounce Al, dump everybody from your roster, get rid of Al, renounce Rob, not re-sign Smart, not re-sign Fournier, and basically have Tatum, Brown, Nesmith, Pritchard, and Beal, and then about $10 million to field the rest of your team. That's roughly what would have had to happen to get Beal. So it was going to be hard in free agency anyway, but now you don't have the space. You don't really have any space now. You've just got Marcus Smart. So this is your team going forward, or you're trading, and I don't know what this means. So what are your initial thoughts here?
Well, first off, I like the move. The price isn't too crazy here. I know it's a paid bump. It's going to go up by about $3 million into the first year of the extension here, which isn't crazy. This isn't a mid-20s crazy overpay for Smart here. It is the max that they could have paid him, but you're essentially limited by what you were making before to extend off of. So this is based on that $14 million he was making now, the most they could pay him. It's not that much more than he was getting before. And on top of it, it does help you if you run into a situation here where you either have to trade for Bradley Beal or trade for anyone else, frankly. Now, there is a 6-month period where they're not going to be able to trade him here. So maybe something comes up in that time period where you say, oh, maybe they shouldn't have done that, and they still could have had the flexibility to trade him in any possible deal that comes around here. But ultimately, we've talked about this, John. If Beal isn't necessarily in the cards, they should probably stick with what the core they have going forward, because what are you going to get that's better here? I've never been a person who said that Smart's a detriment, or that Smart just needs to go to shake this up, or Smart needs to go in any kind of deal here. I think you trade Smart if it makes sense and it packages up to a star. And if that thing isn't out there, then you keep Marcus Smart, because he's a really, really good player. This guy's, his defense did slip a little bit last year. There may be concerns of him possibly sliding more than a normal player would because of the physical aspect of his game. But I'd never liked the idea of possibly letting him go for nothing. Like, that would have been the final straw, I said, of this huge process they've been going through, where it's been Al and Kyrie and Fournier now and Smart. The only thing I'll say is, why isn't Fournier back now?
So that's what we said when it first crossed, and I agree with you, Bobby. Like, grudgingly, my offseason plan, seeing as I didn't think they were going to make any trades, was run it back, re-sign Fournier, extend Smart, extend Rob, pray for the
That
development.
would have made sense if you weren't keeping cap space open.
If
Yeah,
you're
and
not
now
worried
the
about
cap
cap
space is
space,
gone.
that's just tax. That's tax. And I don't care. Like I said, I don't care what rich guys pay in tax. That's not, we didn't become basketball fans. We didn't get into this profession to talk about and to manage the cap. That's not important to people who are interested in the welfare of this team. That's a rich guy paying extra money, which you absolutely expect people to do. And you look at the teams who are willing to go deep into their pockets, the Brooklyns and, you know, Golden States and what have you. That's how it works.
Think of how good this team would look with Fournier on top of what they have.
You pay what it takes, and that's that. So the problem was it would have been a really expensive non-contender, and that's that. So that was the reality. But I didn't see a better path to wins because I never really saw a path to Beal, and because they don't have any tradable assets really to get him or to any third star. So I would rather make this team as good as you can possibly make it by holding on to what you have, and that's it. So I don't get it. I don't get not smart and yes to Fournier. I also don't get why not yes Fournier, no smart. You know, like at the end of the year, what you were talking about, Bobby, was if you had to pick one, who was more valuable? And I understand once Kemba was traded, the equation changed based on team need. But which player would you rather have for 4 years? That's a tough call. Yes, I did, Mark. I'm sorry. I said it was a done deal. I know. And look, there's still something funny with the Beal situation. And
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah, you did go all the way in that week.
We got to have takes, right? But look, there are a lot of indications on the Beal front.
No, we said we'd have a pretty good idea pretty soon of how certain
and
they
it
are.
looked like it because they were clearing. Yeah, they were clearing the thing. My only thought on Smart is this, and I said it again. I was talking to some guys in the chat beforehand. And we talked about this on our thread. Was this a hedge? Okay. Now,
I think so.
So you didn't want to go all in with Fournier and Smart, but you didn't want to be in a situation where you get nothing next year. You can't get a max guy, or you can't work out a trade for anything, or things don't work out for you, and you're left with nothing. And that was that. I still think there's a world in which the Beal thing is something that they want to do. And if Smart is a path, the question becomes whether Smart can be part of a package to Washington. And we'll talk about that in a little bit because we differ on this one. Okay. It's the path to Beal involved trade, not free agency. It had to happen that way. So it's still open, but they would have to. The problem now is they have to want what you have. And I don't know if Smart is that thing. So it doesn't kill you on Beal at all, but I do think it's a bit of a hedge on the Celtics, which is to say, I got to have something, you know, in the bag, because I can't roll Smart into anything if he's in a contract year, because there's no certainty to wherever he goes that he's going to stay. So maybe they think that this is a movable deal, and that's something that we'd rather hold on to the asset. And worst case scenario, I keep Marcus Smart. I think it's a hedge. I don't think Beal is completely out the window. But Washington would have to want this. So you're in a gun to their head scenario where the only way this works is if Beal goes to Washington, is like, does the Anthony Davis, like, I want to go there, so make it happen. And I'm not going to re-sign with any other team. So there's really no reason to send me anywhere. So recoup what you can. And then they have to take whatever they take.
Yeah, there's three ways you could look at it. You could look at it as a hedge. You could look at it as them acknowledging how difficult it would have been to do the Beal and free agency path, where you would have had 3 stars and essentially nothing left.
Nothing left, right?
Yeah. We eventually all came to the realization that was going to be a hard team to win a championship with, despite the top end talent there. Because, I mean, that Heat team was bad with like Mike Bibby and Joel Anthony to start that year. This would have been even worse than that, I would imagine. Now, you do have some young guys here who have shown some signs. Maybe Neesmith and Pritchard would have factored in with that team, but I don't know. Like, it really was looking like a thin, bench deprived group if you went in that direction.
You think the Celtics watch Summer League and they're like, forget about it. Like, Neesmith, Beal, run it, and Neesmith, Pritchard, run it back. Who needs Beal?
Well, this is what's interesting here. I have a hard time seeing why it went from we need all this flexibility. We can't do 2 years for a Jeff Green. We can't do 2 years to a Patty Mills, that kind of guy. And that did work out with Schroeder, but they were fixated on the 1-year deals and all that cap space. And they said it right to us. This isn't something we assumed. They said this in press conference after press conference. We need the flexibility. And they didn't say 1-year deals, but that's what they did. And then they just wiped out that space, which, like, something had to change along the line here, right? Because they were doing this one way and now they're heading in a different direction. Is it because of possible concerns about placating Smart here? Like, I think that could be a factor here, that you had this leak, you had this premonition that maybe Smart would be going out the door for someone like Lonzo Ball here in free agency. That kind of fell apart. And now, to fix this situation a little bit and absolve some like uncertainty going forward here with what you're going to do, this might have been the best way to do all those different things. And yes, hedge a bunch of different situations. Because I, more than you, think that Smart lame duck year, especially after that report, could have been a really tenuous year. Now that you throw Schroeder into this locker room, like, there's a lot going on here that really could have been just a boiling pot.
Well, I want to address that. I'll also say that Jimmy Toscano's a coward. He's in our comments, but he's not on the stream.
If we're pulling out the Garden Report attendance list, he's been a little spotty in recent weeks.
I think he's got, he has actual Wi-Fi situations, which is, I don't know whether it's been put into his new apartment. That might be that might be Jimmy's issue. So he can jump on here and troll us from his phone, but he can't jump on fully and do a Garden Report.
We'll hear his gut reaction to this.
Yeah.
So can we just talk about Marcus Smart, the player, for 1 minute?
Wait 1 second. First, I want to address the other thing, because we talked about this.
Well, this kind of goes hand in hand with it, but go ahead.
Whether or not, look at Jimmy. God, Jimmy. Whether or not Marcus would be an issue, I don't think so. I never entered my thinking that would be the case, because a guy in a contract year, that happens all the time. Many players actually want that. They want to test the market. They're happy to do it because a player like Marcus, again, it only takes one team. My fear with Marcus is not that he's not worth this on an open market. It's whether or not a team that you need to trade with wants this and whether it fits their plan. But if Marcus were a free agent, you think that those dollars are available? Of course. I mean, he was making 14 before. He's the same player or better or somewhere in the same ballpark. He's probably more complete now, even if he had a down defensive year.
Because he came in lower last time then.
Yeah, so I mean, what he's making now, 18 or 19, is 14, from when it's the same money that he was making before, factoring in, what contracts are now. It's not like, that's not a ridiculous amount of money. That's market value. He would get it. So it's
pretty much proportionally the Randall extension that New York did.
Yeah, it's not that he's not worth it. It's that, is that the best use of your money, this is, so we can talk about Marcus particularly. The problem is, I don't know where you take that money and what you apply it to. So you keep letting people walk. You don't re-sign people. You don't hold on to your own talent. You might just end up with worse, because you got to go spend that money somewhere. So without knowing where that's going to go, without having a plan B ready to go, I get this move, especially if you think it's tradable, and maybe it is. I'm dubious on that front because I just don't know that other teams value him the same way the Celtics do. That's always been my issue. He's a great guy to have if you can have him for free, meaning I'm just going to spend money on him because it fits my budget. I don't know if he's a guy you trade for. So I don't know.
So in a sign and trade scenario,
I hate those middle class contracts. The 20 million is real money. It's what he's worth, but it's real money, and it's not a star.
Yeah, but I think oftentimes when you get to where this team has, and I was kicking this around with some friends earlier, it's almost the Hayward situation we talked about. Like, you don't get the 30 million back when you lose Hayward here. You probably get a chunk of the 17 million back if you lost Smart, but nothing toward where you'd be replacing Smart with something better, unless you went that, burn the whole house down and put it all on one max free agent route, which wasn't going to be certain, especially if you didn't build the momentum this year towards signing a free agent like Beal. And luckily, the situation has gotten better over the last couple of weeks where that seems more likely they're going to be able to do that. But at the end of the day, all this stuff we're kicking around, Smart's a really good player, and that's just like the gist of it for me. You have a really good player. He wants to be here. Other guys didn't. You're paying him modestly more than he was getting before. And you've said this too, like he's a little more valuable here in Boston than he is in other places. So that's probably the premium you're paying within just to get it done early. That could get shaky if he doesn't get better, because my rule with extensions and a lot of people's rule is that you do want to see a guy get better if you're going to start to pay him more. I don't know if that's in the cards for him necessarily. Like he did have the best year of his career statistically last year. I didn't get a good sense that he got better as a player. I just think he was in a more expanded role.
His usage went up. I mean, he was.
And that'll happen again this year.
He is. So, I mean, there's another report. And this one is strange to me. And again, I don't know why, Shams and Woj were among the ones, who kind of back-to-back tweeted this. But one of Shams' tweets or one of his reports is Marcus Smart slated to become the starting point guards for the Celtics this season. I don't know where this is from. So I don't know if this is a promises made to Marcus. I don't know if it's a, yes, we got Dennis in here.
Well, there's a corresponding report that the Celtics made no promises to Schroeder. So those kind of fit hand in hand.
So, right. And so you wonder if, like, was there finessing on as part of this with Marcus? Like, you're our guy. Don't worry about this, blah, blah, blah. I have no idea, but it definitely seems that that's being put out there by somebody, that this Marcus is here to be the starter sort of guy. So there's this component to it as well. But, let's just assume that there, have been conversations, or this is. Look, nothing's etched in stone. You don't sign in your contract that you're going to be the starter. They can do whatever they can do whatever they want to do. But it makes sense that the intention is for Marcus to be the starting point guard on this team. Ime alluded to this. There was a bit of foreshadowing to this a couple of days ago when you guys talked to Ime down in Vegas, and you guys got a chance to talk to him, and maybe you can paraphrase it better than I can, but it was along the lines of we're gonna run the ball through Marcus's hands. He said
he's asked for it, and we're gonna give it to him.
Yeah, and so you really get the feeling that the conversations being had here are, you're gonna be our point guard. We're gonna give you money for the next bunch of years, but I need you to be a point guard, and so like I said, as Ime had a couple of comments that you could read a couple different ways. It was very positive about what the expectations are, but also the subtext was, I need you to be less of that other thing. And that other thing could be the guy who's jacking 10, 12 threes a game, which is, again, I know it's in the chat here in the commenters, the thing that drives people.
Can that go in the contract?
Yeah, can you put that in the contract? If you shoot 10 threes, you lose, we drop a year,
He did have body fat clause in his last contract.
Yeah.
So maybe 3-point attempts per game clause.
But that's the things. So you do get the feeling that, like, this is part of the conversation.
He did just retweet the Mannix report, by the way, which is funny.
Who did? Marcus?
Yes.
Marcus himself did?
Yeah.
He went back, dug up the Mannix report, and retweeted it?
Yes, he did. So this is what I'm like. That's who Marcus is. Like, respect and
we know
kind of thing with the officials. Like, that's why I thought this year him in a lame duck status on this team. Hell, Jared's report on his standing with the team last year. Guys getting exhausted with him.
How about our Marcus Smart situation? I mean, he's obviously his ears are up.
His ear is to the noise. And the shooting. Remember Gary with the shooting to start last year?
Yeah.
I forget what his exact response was to that.
But it was along the lines of, like, that's what I do. I'm a confident player. I'm a I'm a shooter. I'm going to keep shooting. He got very defensive when he was asked that. But good for Marcus. I love that he's out there trolling. I love that he's telling us to, shut the, what up.
That's a devastating miss for Mannix. I don't know. There's probably ones bigger than that, but man, to go all in on
there's ones bigger for sure. Yeah. But that to me was, I don't know if it was speculative or I don't know if it was whatever it was. But definitely that one's kind of lingering out there. They hate this guy and his time is running out.
So here's the thing about that. That could still turn out to be the case at the end of the day here. If they do end up just funneling this toward a trade down the line and having it be just a book maneuvering thing, that still makes Smart happy, because I'm sure he gets this deal, he goes off to Washington or wherever, has a bigger role in that next franchise. He's still going to be relatively okay with that because he got the money and the respect here that he deserved, frankly. So I do think on all fronts. Plus, I saw a trade kicker with this. I haven't confirmed that yet, but that could obviously go into the trade thing too. If he gets traded, it's a little bit more money going toward Washington than it is on the books in the contract. Yeah. And it just makes him a little bit more money if he gets traded, like in real money. So, like this, to a lot of people, I think signal that the Celtics are committing to Smart through 2026 as one of their core pieces. That's not necessarily the case here. Like, it is really just the perfect hedge move. He's happy. The Celtics are happy with him as their point guard for now. And if they need to trade him, his money all of a sudden goes a lot further in doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that is what it is. I guess, ultimately what it comes down to for me is you still want as much flexibility as you can possibly have. And you want to believe that you could, if you needed to, move this contract. Now, this is where you and I differ. I don't understand. People will say this is a value. You can trade this contract. And a lot of people assume, actually, this is one of the great things about this contract, that it is now tradable. And I'm, like I said, I'm a little worried that that's not the case, because you don't see very often a case of teams that have decided, we're going to begin our process now. And we're going to strip down everything that we have. And we're going to just do kids and young players. And we're going to trade our stars. And we're going to load up on assets. And we're going to hope that we hit the lottery. You don't see a lot of those teams swinging deals for guys making $20+ million a year over 4 years. And that's what concerns me a little, is everyone's like, oh, yeah, Washington will just take Smart back for Beal, or another team trading his free agent who they're not going to re-sign. And I don't know that that's the case, because it just doesn't, that we don't really see examples of that in these types of trades. You don't really get that. It's always young ascending players, expiring contracts to make money match if need be, and picks. And that's what happens. And Smart doesn't fit the profile of any of those things. So I get the idea that he could be a culture changer, but that more makes sense on a winning team. Or if he were a guy making MLE money, or, as a free agent flyer, yes, bring him in to absolutely change the culture around your kids that might need a kick in the butt. But 4 years, $20 million commitment is a little bit is a little steep, I think, for a team that's trying to strip it down and rebuild.
Yeah, it does depend on the situation there, because the comparison I've thrown out is the Pelicans, who lost Ball. Stunningly to me, took Satoransky and Temple back.
But Satoransky's 1 year, one more year for $10 million, right? That's all he's got.
Yeah, so the money comes off the books in that circumstance.
And that's the thing, is it's a different story. Marcus's extension begins after not this year, right? It begins next year. Yep.
So it's 5 more years total.
If you trade for him in the middle of the year, it's that plus 4, and that's significant. So I don't know that Washington would want that.
Well,
unless they turn around and flip him again. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is a valuable player in some sense, especially if he goes to a Washington and is the man for a year. Like, I could legitimately see Smart having a huge season as a number 1, number 2 option on a team. Remember, this guy, what he was at Oklahoma State coming into here, it was a massive talent on both ends of the floor.
A scorer. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, you could see him going somewhere else than having like a 20, 25, maybe point per game season. Maybe not the most efficient year, but if you're coming down to when you're Washington and you're saying, all right, Beal's gone, he's choosing Boston, and we either get nothing, which actually is what Brooklyn chose in the Dinwiddie trade here, although they were in a hard cap situation.
Right.
Or you get Smart. You probably just take Smart if you're Washington, because it's better than nothing. And the money works out there. Maybe they take another young player or two. But in these sign and trade scenarios, I just read about one the other day. Not that Pelicans one, but one that was a year or so before that. Like, teams will ask for things, and the team that's receiving the player in the sign and trade will just kind of say no because the player's coming. It's done. And even in a situation where the Bulls didn't have cap space and had no leverage there, like they won the negotiation and basically traded 2 guys off their bench for Alonzo Ball. So I think the way the league is set up right now, just in terms of the player power, like any team that's receiving a player who wants to come to a team can basically send whatever they want back. And in this case, like it'd just be smart to make the money work. So I don't really think there's like a pull and tug negotiation between the Wizards and the Celtics at the end of the day there if Beal wants to come to Boston. Now the question is, does he want to come to Boston? I still don't think we have a firm answer on that, but that's why this is kind of a leverage play. And if you are stuck with Smart for years after that, like I don't really think it's like a stuck with thing. He's a really good player. And I think he's going to have a very good year here at the starting point guard role.
You're not stuck with him at all. That's a good point. It is. This isn't going to be
There's
one of
a
those.
lot of people who like. I
No,
get a
that's
feeling
silly. I'm having Avery Bradley vibes. Okay, when Bradley signed his extension, and that was $8 million a year, I was working at NBC at the time, and this is
there was a freak out.
This is a Celtics homer place, and the place lost its mind. Avery Bradley, $8 million for over 4 years. Are you crazy? And I was like,
there was another one like that.
I was like,
wasn't
this
there?
deal is an absolute slam dunk. What is wrong with you people? Like, this will be a bargain in 10 minutes, you know? So yeah, this Smart deal reminds me a little of that, which is like, this is it's still good to have this player. And I don't think you're going to reach a point. He's 27. You're not going to, this isn't in year 2. It's not a Kemba deal or whatever, where it's like, well, you know, years 3 and 4 aren't going to be good, but you'll get 2 really good years before the decline. He's still in his prime, at 27 years old. You're not worried about steep decline here, okay? If you have this level of Marcus Smart for 4 years, you're fine. It's fine to do that. It's just, does it get you any closer to being a contender, or did you have to take a different path to get there, and one that did not involve Marcus Smart? That's the only question. As it is, you're right. And that's why I think it's a bit of a hedge. You're fine if he stays here and all he does is play it out.
Yeah, the right answer isn't necessarily siphoning talent. And who knows, you could have gone in next season after a great year from him at a starting point guard, and maybe he had to potentially pay more. Like this actually I thought was a really good cap on what they would like, because this under the rules was the most they could pay him. And
Yes.
It actually was a pretty good number.
And it's
next
great
offseason, there's no cap at all.
And it's great actually, because the Celtics can say, this is the most I've got. And
yes.
it works for them, and for Marcus, it's like, this is pretty close to what I'm going to get anyway, so I'll just take it. So it is. You're right. It works for both sides here. The one thing, I'll put my Sonny hat on. Okay, I tend to look at things. No, but you look at things critically, and again, for me, it's do they know what they're doing and what the next move is? I'm not sure, but again, I do think the hedge is what makes sense. Is this a championship contending team? No. Without major things breaking their way, players reaching new levels or new heights that we don't expect, like a Nesmith or a Rob or something like that. No, probably not. But to put like a sunny perspective on it, we have not had a year. Marcus Smart has never in his career had a year where it said, it's your ball, son. Take it. You're the guy. Run the show. Be the point guard from year 1 in the league till now. He's been stuck as a tweener, a bench guy, playing some 2, playing backup point guard, thrust into the starting lineup at times, but he's never had one role, and that's, you're the starting point guard for this team, and you have a job to do, and that job is to distribute, to run the pick and roll with Rob, to get the ball into the Jays' hands, to keep the ball moving, and to play 94 feet of defense. Go, and maybe that will help, like, get rid of some of the frustrations people have, because Marcus Smart, for better for worse, is one of those guys who tries to give the game what it needs.
We got a preview of it in the playoffs.
But he tries to give the game what it needs, but it needs different things on different nights, and so that's why some nights you have Marcus Smart shooting 12 threes, and why other times you have Marcus Smart taking 4 field goals or whatever. But I want to see this is where I would say I could feel a little better about it is be this guy. He was the only guy last year on the team. He's the best distributor that they had. Run the point and see how it goes. Let's see how that goes. And you don't have to be anything else there. So, there's no Kemba, there's no interchange, there's no different lineups every night. So that's what I'll say is my, perspective on, this might turn out better. Like we're saying, I think most Celtics fans are looking at it saying, if we get the same player, there's a chance you get a better player. There is.
Yeah, and they have a little depth at the guard position now, and at the wing to some degree, where they can kind of offload some of his responsibilities at certain points if he needs to focus on a defensive assignment. You have some other like ball general guards in here, and Richardson and Schroeder now, who can take the responsibility. They can play a bunch of different ways this year, and that's something Ime talked about last week as well. Like they can go a little bigger. There's probably some nights where Schroeder could lead the offense, and Smart can be hounding a Kyrie type and really focused in on the defensive end of the ball.
Sure.
I thought how thin their offense last year was really hurt Smart because he was so focused on offense and thrust between so many roles, frankly, with the whole Kemba situation going on, that like it was just a kind of unstable year for him, and that's the kind of year he had. It was all over the place, and then you threw the injury in the the cards there. That was a very severe one. So like I think this will be a big bounce back year for Smart. I think all the numbers point toward him being a strong point guard option, like you talk about when he's given the opportunity. We got a preview of it in the playoffs where he was really good. You look at his playoff numbers in that Brooklyn series; they were awesome. He's just a great passer. And when the lineup's been him at pointed attack at point guard and not Kemba, Irving, the team's defensive numbers have been outstanding. So to finally have that be the way the team's oriented, I think is a little bit refreshing because there's been periods where they've been able to play that way as a team. But for most of the time, the Celtics have been a team that's built around an offensive point guard who doesn't defend, and Smart's kind of overcompensating for
and
it.
So, and that's the other thing is when you look at the, the whole being, greater than the sum of the parts. One of the things is, again, you look at Kemba Walker, all-star, 20 points per game, and that's what you're losing there. But again, from as long as we go back from Isaiah Thomas to Kyrie Irving to Kemba Walker, the Celtics have been saddled with an undersized defensive liability at point guard to varying degrees. Isaiah being obviously the worst, and a guy who was at risk of being played off the floor late in games because he was so exploitable because of his height. To other guys who just were just pick magnets, just guys who, Kyrie was on and off with his defensive effort. Kemba tried, there wasn't much he could do. For the first time ever, you have a 6'4" point guard who could guard the other team's power forward if you needed. You have a ton of switchability there on defense, and it might just make the overall unit stronger, at the start of these games. Because again, I'm guessing, we're trying to guess here, but it's either going to be, Smart, the Jays, and the two bigs with Rob and Al, or Smart, Richardson, the two Jays, and Rob. That's a pretty stout defensive starting lineup.
No matter what you throw out there. Yeah.
That's pretty good. You could defend the perimeter a lot better. You have Rob back there, picking balls out of the air. It's better. It's better. You're not
the guy I don't know how Richardson's going to work. Like, that's an interesting choice to throw alongside Smart. That was sort of, all right, this is the best possible.
Like I said, I like Nesmith in there personally, but Nesmith affects the defense because he's a little bit lost. I think Nesmith, if he could slow it down and play passable defense, makes that lineup theoretically better because of the spacing and the shooting. But again, to put my Sonny hat on, Richardson is a guy who, again, it was, a couple of years ago looked like he was an ascending star, like a next, tier 2 superstar type player, like a Robin to someone's Batman, and really kind of fell off a little bit after that. Didn't work out in Philly, and then just
he was next to big ball handlers in all those spots, and the problem here is he still kind of is, right?
Yeah,
Tatum. Smart's going to be on the ball a ton. And then he's probably, Schroeder's your bench point guard. So, like, he's an off-ball shooter again, kind of, in this situation. Maybe a secondary ball handler. But I don't know. Like Ime just casually threw out there, we're gonna get his shooting back up, and it's like, is this kind of a role where that's going to be conducive to doing that? I don't know. I
And
get
again,
it.
but you're looking at if you've got Tatum and I mean, look at it this way: if you're a number 2 offensive option on a team, that means you get X amount of attention drawn your way. But you've got Rob with whatever gravity he's pulling his way, going to the basket, and the 2 Jays who are going to attract attention. You have to imagine in that lineup, Richardson would get a fair share of open looks. Theoretically,
he just played next to Luka and Embiid and wasn't able to get the benefit of that. So I don't know. We'll see how it comes around. He's really just going to have to hammer down that catch and shoot game of his. And it hasn't been great the last few years. That is really what's held him down as an offensive player. Now, defensively, he's going to fit right in. This team as a whole is really going to have to offset a lot of its offense.
I mean, Richardson is pretty average, pretty league average in most things offensively. So yes, he's not ideal. You're hoping you find
the spacing
something.
on this team could be a challenge. You're right. Neesmith needs to break into this rotation here pretty solidly, just for the purpose of, all right, this is your knockdown shooter. Maybe Sam Hauser, as we talked about, fits into some of these lineups as just an automatic shooter, because they really are going to need some shooting here with Smart, Richardson. Schroeder is really not a good 3-point shooter at all. Horford, like, good for a center, but not a great 3-point shooter. Like,
not enough.
Yeah,
not enough. It's again, you just don't. It's gonna be. We've seen these Celtics teams before where a lot of guys can take the 3, like the Jay Crowder teams, but everyone is the same. Everyone shoots 36%. Like there are
this is even more extreme than that, I think.
Yeah. But, we've seen those teams where like they get a lot of open looks. They're just not great at knocking them down.
But those teams were really good because they had a strong defensive floor, and this team has an even higher defensive floor than those groups. I mean, I said this last year, and it came back to bite me, but this looks like the makings of a team that could be number 1 on defense in the league. It really does.
I mean, look, it does, and it'll have to make up for it because you're right. You are lacking in a little bit of shooting here.
Which is good because when you're a defensive team, there's not as much variance.
But this is why
night in and night out.
This is why, not to overreact to everything we've seen in Summer League, this is why seeing Pritchard do what he's doing and seeing Neesmith doing what he's doing on a team that sorely needs shooting. And what's funny is Neesmith isn't even doing it with spot up shooting. He's actually been, getting his buckets, being a little bit more aggressive, getting to the basket, a little in between game we haven't seen. But that's the goal. You need to develop a player like that to fit this team and what this team needs. It's too. You need Neesmith in 2 years this year, and you're just probably not going to get it. The player he'll be 2 years from now. If you could have him right now, that would be ideal. I just don't think he's there.
Well, it makes me
maybe by
too.
midseason. I don't know.
Well, what's good last year, obviously, the whole defensive situation was so bad that when they had their issues on defense, it was all the more exposed. On this group, if they're connected and they have great help and things like that, maybe you can get away with playing some extra Pritchard and Neesmith minutes, even if they're not locked in fully defensively, because you have great help side and Rob, and Horford's able to help them out a little bit when he's out there, and you have all these great defensive guards that can rotate and do things around them. Maybe you can play Pritchard a lot as an off-ball shooter who's just nailing shots with these guys. That could be a benefit of having a greater array of defensive talents around here too. But this team just has options, and I know that can kind of be a blessing and a curse because somebody's going to miss out here in terms of playing time out of all of these different array of guys. But when you're playing different kinds of teams night in and night out, it's going to give them a lot of flexibility and kind of be one of those old Celtics teams where they just have a bunch of different starting lineups. They're able to play the matchups games, and Ime can kind of coach his head off year one. It's an exciting team suddenly. It really is.
There's more possibilities, and they can play. They can play a true small ball lineup. If they need to, and they have more lineup flexibility with what they can do. And again, there are more basketball players on this. You'd think, that will help. Again, you're just the guys who were playing minutes last year just didn't deserve to be playing minutes. When you're giving those minutes now, and again, you've lost Fournier, you've lost Kemba, so obviously Schroeder and Richardson replace those guys. But again, you're talking about Horford, you're talking about Nesmith year 2, you're talking about Pritchard year 2 looking a little bit better. So you're hoping all in all, it's not going to be as
the one
gross
thing we
as it
did,
was. Yeah.
The one thing we did touch on is Fournier. Like, would it have pushed this team any further in the right direction in terms of contention to keep him around, or would it have just made sense to keep him in the fold here, given what you had?
He's a really good player, and I think they should, like I said, I think they should have, and then just roll the dice with whatever happens.
I guess the one thing you could say is that probably pushes you over the hard cap if you do a sign and trade for Beal down the line, I guess. So that's why you wouldn't do that. But I did see our guy Bernardoni there say he wasn't a great fit next to the Jays. I disagree with that. Like, the catch and shoot dominance that he showed in that short little stretch there, 7 of 11 games from 3, great secondary playmaking and scoring. The defense wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst in the world that people made it seem. No, this is for Fournier.
Like I said, I liked Fournier. He was what he was. Again, we had this conversation right after the trade deadline. What are they going to do with Fournier? We literally have had the conversation we're having now. We had the day they acquired Fournier, which was, this is going to be difficult for them. They're going to have crazy choices to make, because if they re-sign Fournier and extend Smart, they will have the most expensive non-contending team, in the NBA. And that we knew that was obvious then. And so what did they do? And you were saying they might have to pick one or the other. They did. They didn't want to do both. They didn't want to be saddled with both contracts. So they hedged. They re-signed Marcus. They let Fournier walk. That was it.
It's interesting because
you wonder if Fournier didn't have that market, Bobby. You wonder if Fournier was here and he signed 3 and 39 or 3 and 42 here instead, if Marcus would be gone. Because
Fournier makes a little bit more than Smart because he can shoot. Like, that's your salary in this league kind of is proportional to your shooting ability, and Fournier is a much better shooter than Smart, so it does actually make sense that he got a little bit more than Smart. Probably should have got way more than Smart if we're just basing off guys' shooting abilities.
Sure.
So, you actually did ask a very tough question to start the show there. You have 3 point guards now, 3 starting point guards, really, and you're missing a wing. So would it have made more sense to kind of have a Schroeder and a Richardson there and have Fournier on the wing? I don't know. In terms of a team building standpoint, that might have worked out better than this did. But there really does seem to be kind of like a heartstring attachment to Smart here that they've had a tough time shaking. And that certainly went into this too, despite the Mannix report.
And it's funny because, even you were ready to move on at the deadline. We'd convinced ourselves, we're like, it's probably time that the Marcus Smart era is over. And now we've got 4 more years, which is interesting.
Feels like it's never going to end.
It's never going to end. What I always say is, doing what I do, and just sports and media and all of this stuff. And for all of these years, the number one thing I like are stories. Having Marcus Smart around is good, because he's so polarizing, because he's so interesting, because people have such strong opinions about him.
He's been the center of Celtics talk on this network since the day he was drafted. He pretty much is CLNS Media's center of attention.
So you know me, I love stories. I love stuff that the best thing is having something that people are equally passionate about on both sides, and Marcus Smart is that thing, and it'll continue here, and we'll see. What you're hoping is there's a version of Marcus Smart that exists that makes everybody happy. But there's a world in which it goes in the wrong direction and everybody's, really pissed off too. So we'll see. My guess is
getting there. He turned a lot of people in recent
years. It's going to be something in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. And now that he's in a bigger role, maybe it could reverse the other way just because of how much more important he's going to be. Frankly, the truth about him is that he would be in a much better situation as a 6th man on the team than a 3rd man where he is right now. And that was some of the trouble they got into last year with him. but I don't doubt his abilities, and that's why I do kind of trust him as the starting point guard on this team, because I've seen his passing, I've seen his pick and roll prowess, I've just seen his connectivity with guys, and I did write just about a month ago like how, what moving on from him and staying with him are both pretty good options, because I thought there'd be value in moves out there like Alonzo Ball that made sense,
Yeah.
just in terms of moving in a younger direction and keeping things in line with the Jays here. But I also think him as a starting point guard for a year is going to be really interesting here. So this is going to kind of be a decisive year for everybody's view on him, and justifiably so. The problem is, if it goes in a bad direction, there's 4 years after that. That's when you're stuck.
It is, but I don't think it's going to happen. So,
No, I think it's going to go well.
Just to recap, Marcus signed the max available contract, $77 million over 4 years. It begins after this season, so he's here for 5 years, I believe.
Yep.
And that is that. Again, we still have comments pouring in. This was a last-second emergency garden report. I'm so happy this many of you guys
We have a
joined.
championship game tomorrow.
Championship game tomorrow, so we're back for post-game show. We're going to wrap this up now, but we can talk more, Marcus, tomorrow. We'll see any new details or any other stories or other perspectives we haven't considered yet. The news broke a couple of hours ago, so we're just reacting initially here to what's going on. We'll have the whole gang back. Bobby's back from Vegas, but Sherrod is still out there, so he'll be checking in after the championship game. Jimmy, I believe Joe Sway is back. So join us. The game's 9:00, so we'll be on around 11. So make sure you come hang out with us. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter, Celtics CLNS. You'll get notified when we go live tonight. Like I said, snap decision. We threw it out there. So we're glad that you guys came in and joined us. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, whether you're watching on our main channel or the Celtics channel. Make sure you subscribe to both of them. Honestly, there's different content on both channels. Tons of stuff for the Celtics if you're interested, plus all of our CLNS podcasts, which almost too many to name. But one of them, Dome Theory. You got anything coming up there, Bobby?
Yeah, we'll do a summer league recap. Guess to be determined, but that'll probably be tomorrow or Wednesday.
Okay, awesome. So again, guys, thank you. We will see you guys. Bobby, last thoughts, or you're good?
No, we did 45 solid minutes on Smart here. I got it all out.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Again, yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Again, Jimmy, Joe Sway, Sherrod, they'll all have opinions, so we'll have more to talk about. And again, they'll bring some different perspective to the conversation. But for Bobby Manning, John Zannis, thanks for